Welcome everyone. Welcome to my devcom talk. Thank you all for joining to discuss how we at Nukeygara are rethinking 3D animation. I hope everybody is having a great devcom so far. And to be honest, it kind of feels weird to be recording from home. I would have much preferred to be standing in front of you to look at all your faces right now. But bear in mind that after this session, we're going to have a live Q&A where I will be answering all your queries directly. Who knows? I may currently be lurking in the chat, just getting a feel for it. So rethinking 3D animation, huh? That's quite a tall order. And for us at Nukeygara, that means bringing back some creativity into what's become a rather technical discipline. So before we get into the heart of the subject, let's say a few words about myself. My name is Charles Arthur, and I would much rather have you call me Charlie. Before I worked in the tech industry, I used to be heavily involved in game publishing. I started off as a marketeer within Ubisoft European headquarters, where I had the pleasure to work on AAA franchises such as Assassin's Creed or Tom Clancy's games. After that, I wanted to see what it was like to be on the other side of the fence, and so I joined Ivory Tower, who was at the time working on the car MMORPG The Crew. And this is basically where I was confronted with what it was like to face technical challenges and create something truly innovative. I went on and took the generous Bandai Namco offer to spearhead the creation of their original IPs developed at a European level. At which point I was primarily working on Little Nightmares, 1111 Memories Retold, and I also gave a few hands on Dark Souls. Then I felt the need to embark on an entrepreneurial journey, and this is right when I was approached by a former Nukeygara CEO Aurélien Charrier, who convinced me to embark on their quest to unleash animators. And so basically, Nukeygara set out to design that rigging and 3D animation tool called akeytsu, and this tool was born out of the desire from Aurélien to build the tool that he basically never had when working as a 3D animators on games like Alone in the Dark back in the Atari days. And the reason for that feel is that when Aurélien started to work in big French game studios, he quickly realized that 3D animators were required to develop many complementary skills while they were initially trained to be artists, and focus on creating beautiful motion. Sometimes it felt that tech could get in the way, and different number of teams may find different solutions to a single problem. So while you were shifting teams or shifting studios, you constantly had to sort of relearn part of the pipeline and adapt your workflows to what was required of you. Sometimes that could be for the better, sometimes that could be for the worst. And the reason for all of this is that 3D programs that are commonly in use right now were born in the 90s and built by engineers that were driven by this mentality of building a jack of all trades, a one-size-fits-all tool where you would find everything to build 3D. Now, don't get me wrong, these DCC softwares are very powerful beasts, but while they can do a great number of things, their ergonomics is not designed for a single one of them. So when you boot up a 3D program for the first time, you usually have to sort of get a feel and organize your workspace for what you set out to do. And so it's the least to say that most 3D professionals were not satisfied with basic software ergonomics. But more than anything, Aurélien really felt that there was a yearning for change within the 3D animators community that called upon a standalone software to be developed just for their trade. And so that's why he funded Nukeygara, to basically go on that mission to unleash animators and bring them some more creativity into 3D animation pipelines. The company was founded in 2014, and after the initial R&D phase, the first official release was done in the fall of 2017. After which, building on the positive response from the community and the promise of a tech that would keep on growing, Aurélien went on to secure additional funding. And after that was done, in 2019, we were able to quite aggressively improve the rate at which we release new updates for akeytsu. And that came along with a new subscription offer that is now sitting in parallel of the perpetual licensing options. Akeytsu's vision is fairly simple. It's there to build a toolset that's specifically tailored for 3D artists. And so in many ways, akeytsu is not a revolution, but a necessary evolution in terms of user experience to have a toolset that is fun, simple, and efficient to work with. In other words, we are trying to build a public Presto. So we find ourselves having a lot of similarities with Pixar's proprietary tool that is basically driven by the philosophy that animators should feel as unimpeded as they can when working on their poses or fine-tuning their shots. To answer that initial question of how we are bringing more creativity into 3D animation pipelines, I first want to give you an overview of the major tool design philosophies that have been prevalent over the years. So what you're seeing on screen right now are the oldest tools that were ever recovered by archaeologists on this earth. These stones were dug up in Kenya at a campsite populated by primitive humans called hominini more than 3 million years ago. And what's really interesting about them is that the archaeologists were actually able to determine that some of them were built to purpose. Some of them were carefully selected for their dimensions or for the resistance of their material. One of which was designed as an anvil, and this was determined by finding out that the stone was actually knapped and it was rotated around as flakes were shot of it. Some others were just sharpened to be used as cutting material. And in these days, these tools were supposed to achieve very simple tasks. What hominini needed were primarily tools to go on their hunt and find their food. But as time went on, more complex needs started to appear. And so if, say, you were to try and create a 3D animation program, you would find yourself not only designing a tool, but an actual tool set where everything should work in combination. And actually, we find ourselves using a wide array of tools, even for the most trivial activities, such as gardening. And it's very I take a lot of relief in considering, you know, how somebody actually designed this tool so that they could be well operated in sequence or with one another. But of course, this may sometime go out of the hands of the designer, and people may find secondary uses for what was carefully crafted. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Actually, it can be for all the right reasons. The user ultimately is always right. You just have to make sure that it doesn't become your enemy. You just have to be sure that you don't mislead him in believing something that he's not supposed to, so that you don't enjoy the ultimate pleasure of having people flaming you everywhere online. Now, with the emergence of the industrial era, we entered into a whole new paradigm where tools were designed to make sure factories worked at their best. And this is often referred to as manufacturing engineering. And so, in this mindset, the tools are there to basically make sure as much as possible goes out of the factories. So you want to reduce the overall cost to manufacture. You want to increase production while maintaining quality and reduce the cost of special tooling. The human aspect of things kicks in very late in the process, and you only consider the safety of the operator at the bottom of the list. And that's because at the time, human life was not as sacred as some would argue it is today. You can quickly see how that can easily be translated into the digital world of making games. And so, with this mindset, again, it's not about the artistry, it's not about the creator, it's about making sure that you can churn out as much game assets as you need to. But quite happily, there is another school of thoughts that emerged at the end of the 19th century in the architectural world, where form basically follows function, and this was coined by architect Louis Sullivan, of which you see one of the building on screen right now. Now, this statement is often misinterpreted in that the outside of the building should reflect what's happening on the inside. But a more accurate understanding of this statement is that what's happening on the inside actually transpires to the outside of the building, because ultimately form is function. And so when you design something, you want that the person who's going into that building quickly feel what it was designed for. He should almost feel compelled to perform the task that he was assigned or that is supposed to. That goes the same with a 3D software, because ultimately there is beauty when something works and it works intuitively. On top of that, there is something that was nicknamed the fiddle factor. Here on screen you can see a pen designed by Johnny Ive back when he was an intern. And the big feature of that pen was that it's the first of its kind to actually feature a ball and a clip at its top. And that's because I've quickly realized that people actually like to toy around with their pens. And so he encouraged them to do so in the design so that they would fiddle around with them in comfort. And Johnny Ive basically went on to become senior vice president of design at Apple. And the fun that he tried to bring into the object that he was creating, the initial the initial joy of just playing with something that very intuitively works, is something that we are quite adamant about at Nukeygara. And here I wanted to quote one of Johnny Ive's statement on design, because I think that accurately reflects what we are trying to do. We've always thought about design as being so much more than just the way something looks. It's the whole thing, the way something works on so many different levels. Ultimately, of course, design defines so much of our experience. When you take that back into the 3D software world, that means that we're not there to basically code a number of modules that piled up together can be used to create great things. We are there to come out with a tool set that, when put in the hand of an artist, should feel like something comfortable to use for him to feel unleashed in his creation. It's very easy to be different, but very difficult to be better. And so in the next section, I want to show you how we think, we've introduced some fresh stuff in akeytsu that actually work better than our competitors. And for this, we are going to go into full screen. But before we do, and if you're interested in the work of Johnny Ive, I strongly encourage you to go and purchase that book that I'm currently displayed on screen. Alright, so let's boot up akeytsu and start the demo. At first glance, you'll notice that we've worked a lot on our user interface to offer something that may look a bit disruptive to some of you, but is definitely pleasing to look at and that you'd like to interact with. It was important that when open, akeytsu would evoke something toyful that you'd want to try and play with. So everything you see on screen falls neatly into place and can easily fit on a single monitor. Not that people read them often according to our last support tickets, but every button that you see is actually commented with tooltip text that we quite recently revised to make them more accurate. Being a rigging and 3D animation toolset made by animators and for animators, it was extremely important that akeytsu would have an accessible and intuitive interface. One of its distinctive features, as you can see, is that you can easily switch to and from rigging and animation windows. But we'll come back to that later to show you how it enables you to perform on-the-fly edits to your rig while preserving your animations. Last but not least, every panel that you see has a question mark icon on its top right-hand corner, which lets you directly access related technical documentation pages on our website. Talking about them, let's go quickly over each panel after we've imported our character. Let me say first that akeytsu currently supports OBJ FBX at import, and that soon BVH will be added with the release of our retargeting feature in a couple of weeks. Starting in rigging mode, we have the rig atelier, which is basically your bread and butter to create skeletons from scratch. Here we are dealing with a classic biped character, but everything is possible. Akeytsu is definitely relevant when it comes to animating weird creatures with multiple limbs. The rig atelier is also where you'll find some of the neat editing tools that akeytsu has to offer. For example, the ability to insert a joint into an existing chain, or parent or unparent existing joints as you wish. You can load blend shapes into akeytsu, and I won't dig too deep into that, but I'm just going to play around with them as I'm talking about what we do. So basically, once blend shapes or morphers are loaded into akeytsu, we offer you with a very intuitive way to design specific mouse directional controls to call on shapes, which is especially relevant to create facial expressions. Our breakthrough here lies in ergonomy, ease of use, and quick manipulations through direct model interactions. You'll also see that all the panels can be moved around and docked as you see fit. By going through the gear in the character bank or the tree panel, you can also choose from different options to extend these boxes and display larger naming conventions. The larger idea being that with these gears, you can easily access settings related to a specific panel without having to parse through drop-down menus. The picker that stands usually next to these two, but is currently placed on the extreme right of your screen, lets you safely reorganize your joints and controller to suit your workflow. You've also got the transform window at the bottom right-hand corner, which is basically your attribute editor and includes a lot of useful tools to mirror and copy-paste values across keyframe. Finally, you have the skin atelier, which lets you do everything painted related, and you'll see that we have a lot of tools for that. I strongly believe we actually have one of the best tool set on the market when it comes to skinning. And some AAA studios actually use us for that just because it saves a massive amount of time compared to other programs. Now I want to outline how character manipulation works in akeytsu. Animating, we think, should feel like posing a marionette. So we're trying to create an environment where you can move characters in a very interactive way through direct selection on the 3D model and use of the spinner widget. This circular widget is designed as the centerpiece of akeytsu and should be placed close to your model to let you focus on animation without unnecessary distractions. This prevents tedious camera moves and misselections. No more time lost and hectic mouse moves to grab that damn circle. You just slide on spinner zones and that's it. Depending on selection, the spinner will adapt to what you're doing and display either classic move, rotate, scale controls, IK pull vector, reverse foot, twist, bank, and roll, or blend shape commands. Akeytsu was designed by and for animators to give them a toolset that they'd be comfortable with, and that would help them unleash their creativity by focusing on motion, while incidentally increasing productivity. We just want animators to feel as unimpeded as they can when working on their shots or assets. To speed up the presentation, I'm going to use our native auto rig to demonstrate how effectively a rig can be created with akeytsu. Our auto rig only works for humans right now, but we plan on making this modular in the future if you can give us a little time. So a few hot points currently needs to be placed and a few options needs to be selected, and here we go. We've generated half the skeleton for our character, and now we can adjust the position of our joints until we are satisfied. Once that's done, we're going to step 2, where we will mirror the other part of the skeleton, add skinning data, and also a few controllers that we'll cover later. As you can see, skeleton is built and bound to mesh. Akeytsu has generated a skin for it with our proprietary delta mesh inspired algorithm. And as we browse through the different joints, you'll see that we've generated a good first pass, which gets you there 80% of the way. But the cool thing is we also offer all the editing tools that you need to get exactly what you want. So here, for example, when we are bending this arm, you'll see that these armor plate behaves quite unnaturally. Ideally, we want that to be totally rigid. So what we'll do is we'll just select the typology, invert selection, hide the rest of the character, and we'll paint everything to all the weights to 1 in order to make it rigid. Once that's done, we can propagate the changes over to the other side by using the very useful mirror function that akeytsu offers. By playing with selections and hiding parts of your character, you can also access the insides of specific areas. These can come in handy, especially if you want to, for example, here, do some fine-tuning when it comes to the face. We also offer a backface culling mode, which may be efficient when you have to deal with additional clothing parts. Let's show you even more cool stuff. Here you'll see that we have a ready animation for our Seabass character. We can go back to the rigging mode, and here I'm going to demonstrate that we can create a new reference pose for this animation without altering anything that's been created. When going back to the animation window, you'll see that everything's been preserved. And we can totally now delete the ref pose and go back to the initial bind pose again without damaging anything that's been created. The other cool thing that you'll notice by looking at the tree is that you'll see there is only one hierarchy, even though I have functional IK chains on my character. Our low-level code allows us to preserve a single skeleton that can support both forward and inverted kinematics. You don't need to spend hours setting up a new hierarchy and making sure everything's right. We'll take care of that and let you focus on what matters. Here I'm going to demonstrate the behavior of our IK solver. So here we're currently in FK mode, and by simply right-clicking the handle, it will switch to red and we will transition to IK, just like so. Here you'll notice that the spinner has adapted and now denotes an orange circle at the center, which basically will give you control over the pull vector. All of this goes into that philosophy that I was mentioning earlier, that posing in akeytsu should feel like manipulating a marionette. On top of that, you can easily delete the IK control and recreate it in a matter of a few clicks, simply by first selecting the chain you want to add an IK solver to, and then creating the controller. Our IK solver resolves chains dynamically based on bind pose or ref pose in existence, even in very extreme or counterintuitive cases when moving joints from the chains. The same easy setup is possible with our reverse foot controller. You just need a handful of clicks to locate the IK chain, create the controller, and then adjust sol limiters. This will basically define the extreme values of your twist, bank, and rock controls. In comparison, this very same process could take a good 30 minutes when performed out of the blue in popular DCCs. When clicked on, you can see that the spinner has changed to adapt to my selection and let me access new controls. In this instance, I can have control over the pull vector, And same goes for the reverse foot. I can also adjust, twist, bank, and roll for my foot. With all this, you can potentially get a first pass for prototype purposes in about 15 minutes for a human character. A bit more if you have to start the rig from scratch in case of other creatures, but here again, our ergonomics being above the bar, it won't take you more than a couple of hours. If you're looking for something that is production ready, with some technical challenges in front of you, such as cleaning orients, dealing with cloth, or maybe creating a facial rig, then you're probably looking at a full day of work. But this only gets better when you take into consideration akeytsu editing capabilities and how it preserves animation work that's already been done, even if you need to go back to the rig after it's been created. Overall, we try to keep our rigging system as light as possible while constantly adding to it. Being entirely focused on 3D animation, akeytsu is just much more permissive in terms of what you can edit compared to other 3D programs. Here you see how I can easily insert a joint into an existing chain, or even parent or unparent a new joint. After doing so, you'll see here that the IK chain still resolves correctly, and I can also perform a number of edits to skinning data. In this instance, I will probably want to transfer over some weights to my newly created joint, and in order to do that correctly, I will lock some influences in my skin atelier to make sure that the weights are correctly transferred over. Once that's done, another cool thing that we are doing to help you save time is that we allow you to mirror anything you do. We've built akeytsu from the ground up so that you will only have to build half the rig and can mirror everything to the other side for symmetrical characters, obviously. In this case, if I want to propagate changes I made to Cblast in terms of skeleton and skinning to the other side, I can just fairly easily do so by hitting the mirror button in the skin atelier. I can also do that with more finesse by excluding some parts in my selection, or even target specific vertices I want to mirror to. And here you'll see that the entire animation has been preserved, even though we still have a bit of improvement when performing changes to not uniformly scaled joints. On top of that, I can also easily edit orients to ease rig manipulation. Here, I'm basically creating a mess to make a case in point. What will happen is that we'll offset everything to preserve as much as we can. Ultimately, we strive to be as non-destructive as we can and rarely crash when you are going back and forth the rigging and animation window, which can make for a lot of time saved in the course of a production. Not only will akeytsu help you meet your production deadlines thanks to its formidable editing capabilities, but we're also introducing a lot in the way of how you animate a character. Before we cover that, let's first have a look at what's on this new animation window. First, we have the animation bank where all your clips are stored for your characters. Another thing worth mentioning here is that you can totally export and import animation data through our proprietary AKNM format to apply them onto another character. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see our time bar with animation layers stacked upwards. Nothing too original here. In many ways, akeytsu is more so a necessary user interface evolution than it is a complete revolution. It lets you adopt a workflow that's very pose-based and it's usually quite easily mastered even by someone who's been trained in 2D animation initially. Thanks to our intuitive user experience, the toolset will appeal to trained animators as well as aspiring artists, easing the pain of professionals while making animation look easy to beginners. With its fast learning curve, akeytsu is quick to get familiar with and implement into one's workflow. On the top right-hand corner, you can see the stacker, which is inspired by traditional X sheets. The stacker is basically our version of that adapted to a 3D workflow that you'll use to tweak timings, add or remove keyframes easily, and activate ghosts to refine your animation. Now let's go over to the mixer panel. In akeytsu, we support both override and additive blending modes for animation layers. Opacity can be adjusted using the sliders. We also offer additional tools to duplicate, merge, and extract layers from existing ones. On top of that, we also support the import of audio files so that you can animate to them in case of a dialogue or a more complex cinematic scene that you need to animate with the audio in mind. So while manual work becomes pure fun with our tools, we know automation can make a big difference. Here is another example of how we introduce automation into akeytsu and allow you to speed up your workflow. Through the cycle maker, akeytsu lets you save half the work when creating animation cycles. You just have to get the first step right, and we'll take care of the rest. First, you want to create your key poses and add a loop key at the end. Now that's done, you just have to click on the cycle step button, and you've got your full cycle that's been generated for you. The second step is automatically mirrored from the previous one, simple and easy. You basically only need 4 keyframes to generate a convincing walk. After that's done, you may be considering further updates to the behavior of your character. And we've kind of planned that already. So in case you want to change the first part of your walk, you can totally edit the way you've posed your first step, and will allow you to mirror that onto the other side by simply clicking on the cycle step button in the cycle maker. And here you have it. Now we also have a curve board implemented in akeytsu, but we've done that a little bit differently. Our curve board is fully integrated into the 3D viewport and accessible via the timeline. It lets you select, pan, resize, move, and add any curve on a single screen while keeping the focus on your character. Linear, spline, stepped, and clamped interpolation modes are available, and all of this can be edited during playback. Again, here we are big advocates that an animator should always be able to focus on its model while performing any number of operations. Everything happens in real time, and you can easily iterate as you go and see the results for yourself. But here again, you may not be entirely satisfied with what you've got. So we've introduced additional native tools that will help you clean your different poses very efficiently. Here we are about to demonstrate our native twin machine that will let you basically transform one of your in-betweens closer to the next pose or the previous pose. We've done that in the simplest manner that you could by integrating it onto the spinner. And of course, while we're applying that to the full model here, this can be performed by selection only. One of the key selling points of akeytsu is actually its stability and reactivity. We've built the program from the ground up with 3D animation in mind, and we made sure that there would be no time spent waiting for your tweaks to happen in the viewport, so that you could iterate safely without wasting time waiting for your animation to play back. Everything happens in real time in front of your eyes, and you can be tempted to try new things without the fear of losing anything. That's basically where we say that akeytsu is there to unleash the creativity of animator, so that they can feel they're in a safe environment when they can be encouraged to create something new. And so that's basically how we are infusing more creativity into 3D animation. Now that you've seen what our toolset has to offer, I also wanted to demonstrate what it was capable of. And so I'm going to show you a few clips in the next slides that were keyframed with akeytsu. And before I do so, I truly want to thank two great artists, Etienne Bechet and Elena Nikolova, for allowing me to feature their work today. We'll start off with the Alien Queen from game Phoenix Point, developed in Bulgaria. And here you can imagine how akeytsu was a huge time saver to manipulate these complex multipede creatures. The non-destructive workflow that akeytsu offered also truly helped in the course of production, as snapshot games designers coming up with new ideas and new limbs that would serve the gameplay. Akeytsu can also be used to animate more curvy creatures, just like this type of very weird half-human, half-insect creature. We do not yet feature spline IK solvers, but with a lot of skill and patience, that's what you can achieve. Finally, who said that mocap was an answer to everything? Here is a great action move and keyed by Elena Nikolova with a 3D model called Vira, and I really thank her for doing that for us. Before I let you go, I wanted to shed some light as to what we are up to in the next months and also the year to come. So we are quite aggressive when it comes to our release schedule, and sometimes we tell ourselves that we need to try and be a little less ambitious next year, because we always end up cracking the whip to deliver as much as what was initially promised. Anyway, this year we first released our auto rig, which for now works for a human biped, but we will keep on improving it in the future. In a couple of weeks from now, the second pack of this year will be out, and this one will introduce cameras in akeytsu and open ourselves up to mocap with the import of BVH file and the addition of retargeting feature. You'll also have more control over how your IK chains will resolve. You'll be able to choose whether they follow along the modification in layers, or whether they hold priority and stay planted. We're also bringing quality of life improvement with the sticky aim and the screen space. At the very end of this year, we're going to add more constraints with starting with space switching, which is basically a dynamic parenting constraint. We're also going to be adding twist joints or roll joints, and if we can help it, we would also like to offer a looker, which is our specific aim at constraint into our toolset. At the end of this year, akeytsu will be the perfect tool for a mid-sized studio that's looking to follow a stylized art direction. So if you ever want to get in touch to see how akeytsu can help you improve your 3D animation pipeline, please feel free to get in touch with me and write me an email to schedule a demo with our tech artist. We are very reactive and we always strive to deliver the best counseling service to our users. I thank you all for your attention, and next I will be answering questions, so stick around and feel free to throw everything at me. I will try my best to reply to you.